I mean, I'm a really bad loser. And yet in tournament poker, you lose most of the time. You know, if we feel like we're exploiting players, but we don't know what we're supposed to do at equilibrium, then we're probably just clicking buttons. They always say that if you can find a group of people to discuss poker with that are slightly better than you, then you're going to make, a lot of progress. A lot of your money in poker comes from players who are weaker than you. So anytime you can play them in position, you should be doing it. And we had no idea what the sort of etiquette was. I remember somebody raised and then pretty much the whole table called, and it got back to the original raiser and no one had 3-bet, but he raised again. And we thought that was okay.
Well, greetings, everybody. Welcome once again to the Rec Poker Podcast. This is episode 81, and I'm your host, Steve Fredlund, and we are officially sponsored by Running Aces, Racetrack, and Casino. And today, it is my pleasure to bring you the interview that I recently did with Gareth James, a very smart, very qualified pro poker player who leads the MTT Poker School. And he also co-hosts the podcast Poker on the Mind, which is a very good podcast that he does with Dr. Tricia Cardiner, whose voice you often hear on this podcast. So I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. I was torn between doing it as one long episode or breaking it into two. But frankly, I just have so many great interviews that I've done. I'm going to start giving them to you one full interview at a time so I can get you the information. So this episode is longer than our normal 30 to 40 minute target, but I think you're really going to enjoy it. And he's got an accent that I'm super jealous of, being from England. So enjoy this with Gareth. We'll hear a word from our official sponsor, Running Aces, and then when we come right back, you'll hear the interview. Running Aces Casino and Racetrack has the best poker room in Minnesota, featuring 24/7 promos on all cash poker games, including earning $2 per hour in comps, plus the most player-friendly tourney structures. Visit runaces.com for daily promotions and the tournament calendar. Running Aces Casino and Racetrack, the official sponsor of Rec Poker. I am here with Gareth James, as promised, live from England. Gareth, how are we doing today?
I'm very well, thank you, Steve. How about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Now we had to kind of coordinate our time over the pond, right? So it's morning here and it's afternoon there.
It is, yeah. It's 1:30 in the afternoon, so just after lunchtime.
Nice. And you're in Leeds?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so for our listening audience, as well as myself, help us locate where is that relative to London?
It's about 3-4 hours north of London. I would say probably 200 miles north of London.
Okay, and you're pretty much a lifelong England resident.
I am, yeah. Moved to England when I was 3 months old. I was born in the Netherlands, but I've lived here pretty much my whole life. I used to live in a place called Grantham near Nottingham. And then I moved to Leeds to study music. And then I moved to London to be a teacher. And then I went around the world and ended up back in Leeds. And now I'm not a teacher anymore, but a poker player and coach.
Now that's super intriguing. So you studied music and then you went into teaching. Were you teaching music or teaching something else?
Yeah, I was teaching music. Yeah, so I spent 6 years teaching secondary school music, like high school music.
Do you still do any of that at all?
I do a little bit. And just to kind of keep, well, actually, it's just a nice thing to do away from poker because, when I'm doing lots of coaching and playing, it's nice to have the balance to go and do other things. So I do, just maybe a few hours here and there each month, just to keep my foot in the door really, and to have that nice change from playing and coaching poker all the time.
Yeah, and for some of us, the recreational players, we look at poker as sort of our escape from our real world, so to speak, our 9-to-5 job, our families, that sort of thing. It's our hobby that we escape from.
Yeah.
But for you where poker is your livelihood, your escape is going to be something else. So music is that for you. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, it's interesting. When I was a full-time music teacher, I actually lost the passion for music. So when I was growing up, I was 15 years old and I went into a recording studio for the first time. I just fell in love with it and thought, well, this is what I want to do. I want to be a writer and producer. And then when I became a teacher, that passion just sort of disappeared because I was spending the whole time teaching music. And when I got home, I really didn't want to do that. So in fact, when I was a full-time teacher, my my escape was poker. So I would do the full-time music teaching and then come home and play poker in the evening and at weekends.
Interesting. So have you found now that you've transitioned, and we'll talk a little bit about what you're actually doing in the poker world, but as you've transitioned for most of your world being poker, have you found that that's been difficult to keep that passion for poker once it becomes sort of your livelihood and your full-time gig?
Yeah, I was really worried actually that would happen, given that it happened the same thing in music, but so far so good. I've managed to just have a nice balance between everything at the moment. So, I spend time away from the office, away from playing and coaching, doing things like going to the gym and playing other sport and seeing friends, socializing, going to gigs, things like that, which has really helped. But yeah, so far I've not sort of burnt out in terms of the poker, playing poker all the time. I've still got as much passion now, if not more passion than I've ever had, to continue sort of developing, getting better, and helping other people get better as well.
Well, that's awesome. That's what we're all about. So how did you get started in poker? So you grew up involved in music, but was poker or card games always part of your life, or how did you get introduced to this game?
Yeah, the only card games I used to play as a kid was like Snap, probably. It certainly wasn't something we used to sit around the family table and do. I might have played Solitaire and Free Cell on the computer, but that was really the limit of the card games. But yeah, so when I finished my music degree, I was living in a place called Headingley, which is a very much student-friendly area of Leeds. For any of our UK listeners, they'll know it probably. And I was living with a guy called Andy, and he was playing online poker. And I thought, oh wow, this is interesting. And I'd always been the kind of guy like, I wonder how I can make a quick buck. How can I find a way to make an easy living? And this looked like it was going to be it. So I started playing 1 cent, 2 cent limit poker. And looking back at it now, like thinking that I was going to make a living playing 1 cent, 2 cent limit poker is very laughable. But it was a way I could play a game on the computer, because I always loved playing computer games. I used to play lots of football games on the PlayStation growing up. And I thought, I can play a game here that I could actually make some money out of as well. It didn't work out in the early stages. I kept on depositing $10 and going from there. And then I sort of discovered sit and goes, and that I just loved them. But at this point, I guess I must have like read some books, or because it wasn't really at least I hadn't found the forums and the discussion groups and Discord groups and Skype groups at this stage. So I must have read some books at that point. And whilst I was still, really, really bad at the game, there were players who were worse than me. So I was able to actually build up a bankroll playing like $5 sit and goes at the time.
Do you think it was just because you had gotten better at the game, or was there something inherent about sit and goes that was better for your style, your personality, your game, or was it just?
I think that's a great question. I think if there was anything, it would be the competition. So I grew up in sports teams. So I played cricket and football growing up, and I love competition. And I think when I was playing limit games, it was just one continuous game really, and there wasn't if you came out ahead, was that really a win? I'm not really sure. But then when I played sit and goes, I thought, wow, you can actually win this, and I really wanted to win. So that was probably the driving factor there. And I guess that's kind of why I then sort of transitioned to MTTs, because then there was a much bigger first prize, and if I was fortunate enough to win, it was going to be worth a lot more than the sort of peanuts I was playing for in the $5 sit and goes.
Right, and I think that's true of my personality as well. I rarely play cash, primarily not because it's not a good ROI or those things, but there's something about the competitive nature of seeing. You start with 10 tables or 20 tables or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You narrowed the field, and ultimately there's a champion. And there's something about my personality that drives me to want to win. And obviously, you can make the money's a lot bigger, in those sorts of situations. But I think the competitive nature is there. So I think a part of it is understanding your own personality and what drives you, whether it's just your best ROI for a given session, or if it's the competitive nature of wanting to eliminate your opponents.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that I did choose tournament poker, because I'm a really bad loser, and yet in tournament poker you lose most of the time.
Yeah.
So those two things don't kind of go together. But I feel like every time I lose, I just encourages me and motivates me to want to get better and to do better next time. So maybe that's why I was stuck with tournament poker. But yeah, it doesn't really make too much sense.
I get it though. I totally get it. So, I mean, it's sort of like going up there swinging for the fences. You want the home run rather than just being to hit singles all the time, using the baseball analogy. So,
Yeah.
talk a little bit now. I want to talk a little bit about how you got from there to where you are now. But let's first kind of ground this. And where are you now? What are you doing? What are you all involved with? What are you playing? All of that sort of thing.
So at the moment, I run a website, mttpokerschool.com, where I'm the founder and the head coach. And what that is an opportunity for sort of developing tournament poker players to just sort of hone their fundamentals. So I do a lot of work with those kind of tournament players who are looking to just improve their results and make the step up. I find that there's a lot of the sort of fundamentals of tournament poker that can be really sort of solidified so that then people can go on and start developing other areas of their game. So that's one aspect. And then I'm playing 3 times a week, mid-stakes MTTs online. So I play on Stars, Party, 888, iPoker as well. And then occasionally I go off and play some live poker as well. So a couple of months ago, I was at the Irish Open, and then next month I'll be heading over the pond and going to Vegas.
Are you going to be there for the entire summer, or how much time are you going to spend there?
I'm there for 18 nights. So I get in at the sort of end of June, right to the sort of pretty much the end of the series.
You'll play the main event then as part of that?
I'm actually not going to play the main. So I'm the biggest bankroll nit around.
Yeah.
And, I could sell for it. And I've talked about this to lots of people, and they say, well, you just got to sell. Like, if you're there for the main anyway, like, it's the highest value tournament. But if, the more I sell, the less I win, and the smaller the event becomes anyway. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, if things go well, I'm there for 10 days, I think, before the main, possibly. And then I'll play the main. But my plan is not to play the main. I'm going to play the Monster Stack as kind of my main event, and then a series of other events like the 1K online. And there's some other mains. It's like the WPT 500 and the Golden Nugget main as well. And then there's various other tournaments that I'll play. But I'm not going to be, it's such a big difference going from online and playing mid-stakes in terms of the money you need and the bankroll you need to go and play too high when you go and play live.
Right. And what do you consider mid-stakes online? What is that range?
It's like 22 to 109.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've just heard different people use different terminology, so it kind of sorts of grounds.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good luck over there, and I'm going out to Vegas myself, but we won't be. Our schedules will not be connecting, so no chance to grab a drink together or anything.
Oh, it's a shame. Maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe next year. Good luck over there.
Thank you.
Okay, so you got the training site. Talk a little bit about who's your target audience for that training site. I mean, we have people that are sort of across the spectrum listening to this podcast. Is that geared primarily for beginners, for sort of advanced players looking to take the next level, or for really kind of top level folks?
It's really for sort of just the next step up from an absolute beginner. So you might have been playing tournament poker for a while, and but you just don't have the results that you want, or you think that you should be getting. So if you're playing micro or low stakes online, that's definitely my target audience. Also, cash players that are transitioning to tournaments. So, whilst I might focus on the micro and low stakes players, if there's a cash player that's getting set up to play, we've got series coming up, we've got Scoop and Powerfest and various things like that going on in the next few days, then I'll work with them on their tournament fundamentals. So, I don't want to say it's just by stake. There are some, I've worked with some, I've actually worked with some of the highest like nosebleed stakes players, transitioning to tournaments because the fundamentals are so different. Yeah, it's the same game, but there's so much difference. So I guess if you feel like you're a competent cash player and you're trying to transition to tournaments, then definitely that's who I like working with. And then micro and low stakes tournament players who are trying to be more profitable, but also jump up to mid stakes.
Can you give an example of one of those fundamental things that you're referring to when you'd say they're just fundamentals that people need to improve? What are those things that people are coming to you with that they have the biggest gap in, that they need the most help with, or that you're convinced is really a key to tournament success?
I would say it's around stack size awareness. So especially cash players that are used to playing 100 big blind poker, they're great in the first few levels of a tournament. But once their stack drops to 40, 30, 20, 10 big blinds, the strategies change so much. And even those players that just play tournaments, I see a lot of mistakes at shorter stack sizes, like not understanding that you can shove for you could open shove for 20 big blinds sometimes, or sometimes it's only appropriate to shove for 12 big blinds, but then you can 3-bet shove for up to 30 big blinds. So just being aware of what each stack size allows you to do, I think, is the biggest thing, I think. And then you can develop strategies for each of those stack sizes and how you respond to players with those stack sizes as well.
Cool. So I'm thinking about now your journey. I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit, but your journey from seeing your buddy playing 1 cent, 2 cent, and thinking, hey, I can make a living playing 1 cent, 2 cent online, and then playing the $5 tournaments, and thinking about how many people are sort of in that situation that you were in, thinking, man, I can make a living out of this. But yet the reality is probably very few actually do. And now you're playing bigger tournaments, you're playing the World Series, you've got a training site, very successful in the eyes of the poker community, very well respected. How did you, was it just luck? Was this just another element of variance, or what do you give credit to for being able to make that move from, the small stakes grinding, having poker as being just a hobby, to now poker as your career?
Well, I mean, it's a really great question. I think persistence was the key thing for me. I think within tournament poker, I feel like you can definitely go on a bad run, and I feel like there's a lot of players out there who've gone on a downswing. Maybe it's down to their own ability, or maybe it's just down to variance, but they give up too soon. And I think for me, it was persistence, and as soon as I recognized that in tournaments, you're going to have some good days, and you're definitely going to have some bad days as well, that you have to sort of battle on through and continue to register, to continue to work hard. So yes, persistence and hard work is the things that kind of got me to where I am today.
Are there certain elements of your game that you've really worked on, that you've said, man, these are the gaps that I need to overcome, and you've been diligent to overcome those?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I mean, growing up with sit and goes, I felt like I developed a pretty good understanding of ICM and short stack play. Sub 30 big blind poker was just very, very good. But once we got deep stacked, then I definitely found that there was some areas for development. So there's a lot of time in tournaments where you very rarely see turns and rivers. So playing turns and rivers was an area that I needed to work on. So that's what I set about and actually did.
So what did that look like for you in terms of working on it? Is it just getting more reps, playing more online, playing, trying to enter more pots to give you that experience? Was it off the field study? Was it discussions with others? How did you actually work on that?
Yeah, so I just fired up some cash games, like very, very low stakes that it didn't matter to me. I could punt, I could experiment, but I could actually get in, like you said, like the reps and experiencing more turns and rivers, because, as tournament players, we just don't get to see enough turns and rivers. And as soon as we get deep stacked, we definitely lack the experience, and that's exactly what it is. So when you come up against a cash player, they're just going to be very much more comfortable playing turns and rivers. So yeah, I played a lot of cash. I got coaching from a few cash game players, actually, coaching me to play cash games rather than even like the deeper stack parts of tournament poker. And then more recently, I've really been using solvers. So using Pio Solver every single day to run lots of different spots to to see what the GTO line is, but then, working out how the population is sort of deviating from that. I really believe that, if we feel like we're exploiting players, but we don't know what we're supposed to do at equilibrium, then we're probably just clicking buttons.
It's what you mentioned there is a theme that I hear in a lot of these interviews that I do, where a lot of this, if I'm hearing you correctly, a lot of this is study off the felt, so that you're prepared when you get into that situation that you sort of already know, versus trying to do high level stochastic scenario generation in your head. You've sort of done the study and you said, okay, here is at least the baseline, whether you call it GTO or equilibrium or sort of my default play, and then adjust for the situation. Versus trying to do all of that analysis in real time.
Yeah, and the thing is, we get a finite number of hands in our lifetime. So something that I do when I study, but also encourage my students to do, is to change some of the variables. So just to take an example of, let's say, just really simple push fold. Changing the variables, like, okay, we're at a final table, and now we're in the final table bubble, or we're on the bubble of the min cache. What about if we have 15 big blinds versus 20 versus 10? What if our opponent is loose? What if our opponent doesn't understand he should be calling wide here, or he should be calling tight? Like, what effect is that going to have on our strategy? And so just changing all those variables from just one hand allows you to sort of multiply your understanding and learning and your experience of those hands. So like I said before about the cash games, we don't get to see many turns and rivers playing tournaments. And so it's just about experience, and cash game players have seen more turns and rivers, so they're probably going to be better playing those turns and rivers. So in order to experience more hands, we can actually sort of make up or change the variables to make new hands and learn from that.
I love that. And we actually ran some scenarios or did some hand situations, in earlier episodes where we did something just like that, where we talked to the pros and we said, okay, here's the situation, what's your optimal play? And then asking sort of what sizes would the stacks have to be for that to change your decision? Or, what type of player type would it have to be to change your decision? And I think it's the same idea of sort of taking individually each factor and saying, okay, let's sort of pull that lever a little bit and see if that changes our decision. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, we look at that, and for many of us, that even have been playing for years, we're still recreational players, and we look at the volume of factors that we're supposed to consider in sort of any situation, and it seems so overwhelming. Sometimes we just throw our hands up in the air. Do you have a general framework for which factors are maybe the most critical to pay attention to if our brain doesn't have the capability to take 12 factors into account and remember all of those things that we're supposed to consider? Besides, I guess stack size is one for you, but how do we sort of build that framework or that decision making ability to understand which factors should we really be paying the most attention to?
Well, you're really coming with the great questions. I need to.
I've got a lot of questions, Gary.
Yeah, that's a really great question. That's one I need to just to think about for a minute.
Yeah, and I can kind of fill in the blanks a little bit, just because what we'll talk about is when we break down hands, specific hand situations, people say, well, you need to make sure you pay attention to stack size, and of course effective stack size, and your stack to pot ratio and all of those things. You need to pay attention to the overall tournament. What's the tournament situation? Are you nearing the bubble? Are you in the money? What's the ICM implications? What's the player type that you're against? Considering all the players that are yet to act behind you, what are all of their stacks? What are they potentially going to do in this situation? What's your table image? What's their table image? What's your, there's so many things that when we're breaking down a hands, people will just say, well, you got to consider that too, or you didn't consider that. And, is there a framework that we, think about? Are there factors that we should pay attention to more than others? Or is this simply just a result of experience, and those things just become second nature, like thinking about position when you're going to be opening pre-flop?
Yeah, so I think I've never really looked at it in terms of a framework. I like going back to how you were talking about off the table study. The more that you can do that, the more it becomes sort of intuition to know, okay, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should be looking out for the various factors. So, I mean, something that I would encourage is to focus on the areas of the game that happen time and time again. So, when it's folded to us, that happens time and time again. And so that, at a very basic level, we need to know the hands we're going to open, how we're going to respond if someone 3-bets or jams. And that's something that you can do away from playing. But you can also do in the moment as well. You can say, okay, this is the range of hands I'm going to open. If the guy next to me decides to 3-bet, these are the hands I'm going to 4-bet, or the hands I'm going to flat, and these are the hands I'm going to fold. And to approach it from sort of the range perspective at that sort of juncture, and knowing exactly what you're going to do, however anyone responds to that. So I think that's a key thing to focus on. But then, yeah, you're right that there's all these other factors that can just sort of cloud that initial thought process. So I think if you're focused, okay, these are the hands, this is my range. Like even before you look at your hand, you could say, this is my range here, and then how it's going to go from there, and start thinking about the sort of different different branches of the tree that you could possibly go down.
Right, exactly. So sort of the like playing chess again, just kind of thinking ahead and what could happen and what you're going to do. And so in those moments, I mean, in your process of opening pre-flop, you've already established, what range, at least your default ranges for opening, default ranges for either folding, calling, or 4-betting a 3-bet. Those are all sort of just ingrained in your head by position against certain types of people. And so you're really not spending a lot of energy thinking about that then.
Yeah, exactly. Because I've done the work off the table, and I know the adjustments I need to make based on, the players who are still left to act.
Okay. And so then what could cause you to deviate from those? So if you sort of have this pre-flop strategy, at least of, opening and then folding, calling, or 4-betting a 3-bet, what are those key factors that are going to make you potentially deviate from your default strategy?
So, I mean, the player that's on the button is going to really have an impact on the range of hands I want to open. So if he's too loose, I certainly can't get wider. As we get deeper into a tournament, I'm going to want to play more aggressively, play more hands. But if the button is an aggressive 3-better or just likes to flat, we are going to struggle. But if the button is a 15 big blind stack and is just looking for a spot to 3-bet jam, then we can definitely open wider than our default ranges. The players in the blinds are going to have a huge impact on how wide I want to open. So, a lot of your money in poker comes from players who are weaker than you. So anytime you can play them in position, you should be doing it. And so if the big blind or the small blind is going to be flatting a lot, I mean, in tournaments, we see a lot of flatting from the big blind now anyway. But if the big blind or the small blind are particularly weak, then opening up your range and almost encouraging them to play more pots out position against you is going to be good for you in the long run, because you're just going to win much more. And the more hands you can play against weaker players, the more money you win. So or make. So if you, I'm just going to throw a number out here, but if you won half a big blind, for example, every time you played a hand, then you'd want to play as many hands as you possibly could against weaker players. So if you would normally only play 8 out of 10 hands, for example, that got folded to you in this situation, then maybe you should play 10, because that's an extra big blind added to your win rate.
So as you're just considering all of that pre-flop, let's just say, for example, this isn't probably a right range, but let's say I'm, in some position and my default range is opening pocket 6s or better and ace jack suited or better. So that's sort of my general range to open. But then I know, certain things about the button and the blinds that make me want to expand that range. So all of this is sort of happening in your head before you see your cards. Right now, I may be expanding my range to deuces or better, whatever. Is that sort of what's going on in your head? Is all of that sort of before you're looking at your cards, you've either expanded or contracted your range in your head?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does when I play live, but when I play online, we kind of the hand's already there, so you don't get time to think about your range. But I know, okay, it's folded around to me in X position, and I know, okay, this is my default that I would open from here. Then I have a quick glance at the stack sizes and the players behind, and then that impacts on the if I'm going to get wider. So I tend not to go too much tighter than the default, because it's a default, because relies on, it doesn't really matter what anyone decides to do. That's the sort of the tightest I want to open, and then I'm definitely going to go ahead and get wider based on the other players.
Oh, okay. So you really see it as sort of here's the GTO optimal, here's the minimum range to
Exactly.
open, and you only expand based on exploitive opportunities.
You got it. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Very good stuff. Okay, so if you're thinking about, you already talked a little bit about stack size and how you see players making that mistake all the time. What are some of the other things that you see at the table that are, or, through your coaching, where these are just the biggest glaring mistakes, and if people could just close this up in their game, they'd become a more winning player?
I mean, the biggest thing is not even a strategic thing. It's being better at managing a bankroll. In tournament poker, it's just the most important thing. And I'm seeing lots of players go broke because they're not able to manage their bankroll. They want to play too high too soon, and they just burn through all of the money they've made. So managing your bankroll and being more conservative with it is going to lead to a more profitable career. Like you might be, you could play very aggressively. You can aggressively shot take, and that's going to be great in the short term. But long term, you need to be a little bit more conservative and just manage the bankroll more effectively. And so recognizing the effect of your ability versus the other players, the effect that field size has, the effect that the number of players paid is going to have on your bankroll. The choice of game that you play, and also the type of games that you play. So, are you just playing hyper turbos and turbos, which I know a lot of sort of low stakes live tournaments tend to be very turbo-y in nature. Or are you finding like the best structure possible? It's going to have a huge effect on the games that you should be playing. So that's the biggest leak I see. It's prevented a lot of good tournament players from actually progressing because they just burn through their bankroll.
So do you have any sort of guidelines for folks as far as their bankroll relative to the size of the game that they're playing?
Yeah, I mean, I always used to think around 200 buy-ins as an average would be good. But if you're playing a lot of the online stuff, especially in Europe or Canada, we're pretty fortunate to still have PokerStars and Party Poker. Looking for even more than 200. If you're playing like an 8,000 player field, you're going to need like 500 buy-ins for that tournament. I know a lot of players that play the Sunday Million each week, and they're not actually making any money from it. Because it happens once a week. You only get to play 50 of them in a year, or 52 in a year, and you just don't get to play the tournament enough to realize your true expectation. Because the field size is so big, if the field was a 45-man sit and go every week, then you definitely realize your expectation much sooner. The bigger the field, the more buy-ins you need, and obviously the smaller field, the fewer buy-ins you need.
So if you have players out there that are thinking, boy, I'm playing these small stakes, but the structures are so crappy, but I think I'd be better at a better structured tournament, but I don't have the bankroll to play a better structured tournament. Is your recommendation generally, well, play the smaller stakes? If you can't beat those, you're not going to beat the bigger ones? Or would it be potentially, maybe find investors that can get you to that ratio that you need?
Yeah, that's always a difficult dilemma, really. It almost sort of comes from moving up to where players respect your raises, but more in a sense, I guess where you're going is that like you said, like the structure is going to be better, so it's going to suit you. It's not going to just be a complete gamble at the end, very just full of push fold like a lot of turbos and hyper turbos are close to the end.
Right.
So I mean, I always recommend playing regular and slow structures online. I think turbos and hypers are great fun, and if you're short on time, then that's great. But I would always recommend the best structure possible, giving yourself the best opportunity to be successful. I think looking for investment is going to be good, but it's going to be hard to do that if you don't have the results playing these other tournaments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sort of a catch-22. Show me your results. Well, I don't have them, but trust me, I think I could do better at the bigger stakes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could sell to friends and family,
right? Yeah,
in the first instance, and then go from there once you do have some results. Would you say most of the listener base is in the States?
I'd say most of it is. Yeah, probably about 90% of it's in the U.S.
Yeah, so like part of a lot of my experience and opinion is going to be, okay, well, get yourself online and play a ton of
Right.
poker online, show your online results, and then you'll definitely be able to get investment for live tournaments. But I recognize that that's not really the case in the States. I mean, you obviously have some online sites like America's Card Room, and depending on where you
Right.
are, like the PokerStars New Jersey, and WSOP just joined the 3 states, didn't it, together? So if you can do that, then great. If you don't have that option, I'm not sure what the answer is, apart from just trying to fire as many tournaments as you can. But the thing with live tournaments is that you just don't get to play enough of them in a year to, again, realize your true expectation.
Exactly. One of the things I found, though, I've had investors for the last several years. I've been playing about 7 or 8 years, and I've had investors the last several years primarily just because I want to reduce the risk. But one of the advantages of that has actually been I've been able to build an actual fact-based historical live results foundation that I can then share if I'm looking for investors in other tournaments. So I've got sort of a track record built in already. So there's some advantage doing that. Of course, it's kind of a pain to manage, and you always got you're dealing with family and friends and money and that sort of thing. That can be a difficult thing, but it has allowed me to reduce the risk while also giving me a track record, giving me an honest sort of assessment of how I've been doing.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I really like that. I don't mean, like I said, like it's easy for me because I have online results and I can then go ahead and say, maybe I will end up selling for the main.
Yeah. I can download those and show everybody, show the world. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you had somebody that come up to you, right now, says, I'm brand new, I've never played the game at all, but I want to learn Texas Hold'em. I saw the main event and I want to win $8 million or whatever, whatever it is. They said, okay, where do I start? Like, what's the best way to start getting into this game? What would you say?
I would say just find some way of playing. I think experience in the first instance is going to be really important. If you can find a friendly home game or bar league game where you're not going to be berated because you don't understand the rules,
right?
Then that's going to be great. I mean, I started. The first time I played live poker was a live home game, and we had no idea what the sort of etiquette was. I remember somebody raised, and then pretty much the whole table called, and it got back to the original raiser, and no one had 3-bet, but he raised again, and we thought that was okay. And so I thought, wow, this. But we were in such an environment where nobody really, it didn't matter, and we were playing again for like £5. And it was a friendly environment. So if you can do that, then that's great. I mean, there's so many resources now. I think some can be quite overwhelming. There's loads of free videos on YouTube. There's loads of articles, loads of sites out there now offering free advice. I mean, in a way, like if you can find someone who's slightly better than you to sort of teach you, or to take with you, like to a home game, then that's probably a good way to start. I mean, they always say that if you can find a group of people to discuss poker with that are slightly better than you, then you're going to make a lot of progress. So if you can find somebody like that, then that's great. But yeah, I mean, there are just so many resources now. Like I sort of alluded to at the start, where I said I didn't really know about the forums and the Skype groups and the Discord groups that now exist. But there are so many now that you're spoiled for choice. So it's just finding one that you like and you enjoy being part of, and posting questions in those.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of what I'm hearing inside of that is being curious, being a question asker, but also the humility to recognize you don't know what you're doing necessarily in every situation, but being willing to learn from others. I think sometimes hubris can get in the way of our ability to learn anything in life. So I think there has to be this posture of sort of humility going into learning the game.
Oh, massively, yeah. I mean, that's still the case for me now. And I think if any poker player tells you that they know what to do in every spot, then they're probably deluded. So it's still something that you need to be aware of and be happy that there's still spots that you don't know what to do. The more you study, the less frequent they become. But I actually enjoy it when I find a spot that I don't know what to do, because it means that there's an area there that I need to develop and work on. But yeah, I see it. I see some new players who are not as humble
Mm-hmm.
or open to suggestions. So, I mean, I love learning, and I like listening to other ideas, and I'm certainly not going to be so set in my ways that I'm going to disagree with everyone. But I see a lot of new players coming in and saying, "What do you think about this bluff? Like, it was really good, right?" And then you analyze it, and actually, it's not a very good bluff. And you give them that feedback, and you just explain why it's not so good. But they don't like that; they get very defensive.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just, as poker players, we are very defensive. But I think we need to be less defensive. We need to be more open. So, yeah, I mean, I would just encourage, those new players, but also everybody to be more open. Discuss and share ideas, and that's going to help you learn and continue to learn as well, because there's so much to learn in this game. I've just started learning other games like PLO and Raz and Stud, and I'm just amazed at how much I don't know about those games. But even just coming back to No Limit Hold'em tournaments, there's so much that I still need to learn in that as well. So just being, like you said, having the humility to recognize that there's still so much to learn, and being happy with that, and just cracking on and getting on with it.
Yeah, I think that's a general principle in life. Is I think a lot of times our ability to learn, or our knowledge base is capped based on the lack of humility that we have. I think that's really is a critical part of learning, is having that humility to say, maybe I'm wrong here, or maybe I don't have the right answer, or learning from others. So that's good stuff. And you mentioned briefly about having a safe place where you're not going to be berated. And one of the things that, and maybe this is different from the U.S. from England, and I hope for your sake it is, but I think I'm pretty convinced that one of the reasons why the game isn't growing as fast as we'd like it to grow, in terms of, some of the mid majors getting players and some of the bigger weekly tournaments getting players, is that there's still, what happens is the recreational players like myself that are playing the $50, $100 buy-ins go play an $1,100 buy-in, and we might make a mistake. And we might win the pot because we made that mistake, and then just getting berated for the play, or or whatever it is, or you open, there's 4 limpers and you open to 3x, which doesn't accomplish anything, and somebody makes some snide comment about these crappy players or whatever. So I think there's still this berating that happens even in Minnesota. We're known for our niceness, that happens, and I think that can lead to lack of growth in the game. And I'm curious your thoughts on that, and what message, how do we help people recognize that berating worse players is not helping your ROI?
No, yeah, I've never understood how that, like, why that happens. What I spent most of my time playing online, and so, but when I do go and play live, I see and hear exactly what you're talking about, and it just amazes me that people would do that. People that call themselves pros as well will start, giving strategic advice. Like, that's surely got to hurt your ROI. But then they'll start berating them as well. And you shouldn't be berating them, because again, that's going to affect your ROI. If somebody knows that they're doing something wrong, they're either going to not play anymore, which is going to hurt your win rate, or they're going to fix it. And then the edge that you have over them is going to be much, much smaller. So in terms of how do we get around that? I mean, I'd like to see poker tables where no strategy is discussed and no comments are made on each other's play, and you're more concerned with getting to know people at the table, where they're from, what their story is. That for me is much more interesting. And I'll always try and sort of, when I'm at the playing a live tournament, is to sort of focus my attention on that rather than anything else. And if somebody starts talking about strategy, I'll try and sort of steer the conversation in another direction, because I just don't think it's going to help anyone. But yeah, in terms of how we can encourage, more positivity at the table, I'm not entirely sure. I don't play enough live poker to know exactly what we should do.
Yeah, because I think the strategy side that you talked about, it hurts your ROI to give people tips or to tell them it was a bad play. I mean, that's clearly going to hurt your ROI, but also, you think you want the more people in these bigger tournaments, the better, because the fields are bigger, the prize pool is bigger. And frankly, the recreational players, we're not really a threat to win the thing. I mean, yeah, anything can happen on any given day, but you'd think you'd want to do as much as possible to get more of us at the table. And, berating us, isn't going to do that, but also befriending us, kind of what you're talking about, is actually going to make us want to come. Like, hey, I sat next to this really good player, and he was interested in my life. He asked me about the work I'm doing in Africa or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was a great experience. Even though I lost $1,100 in the tournament, I actually had a great experience, and I might play that again because it was a good experience. And I think that's the piece of, I think for some people, needing to take their competitive nature and sort of flip it on an ear and say, yeah, but for the big picture, it's better to actually be welcoming to people to play this game.
Yeah, for sure. And for someone like me, coming from an online background, if I sit there with headphones on for 12 hours, I'm going to be bored out of my mind. I'm used to playing 9 tables and having, several decisions a minute to sort of keep me occupied and to stimulate my mind. So if I'm not engaged in conversation or being part of the table and enjoying that experience and helping other people enjoy that experience, it's not a very good experience for me. It's a lousy experience, and I don't want that. So if any,
right,
I tried to make it as a great experience for everybody, but it's also from almost like a selfish point of view as well. Like I want to enjoy the experience as well.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, so let's get back to a little bit about your game and what now as you're playing, whether it's online or live. What's your biggest edge? Like, where do you say, this is something that I do probably better than most people that I'm up against? Yeah, I have things that I don't do very well, but this is something that I do really well that I can really teach people about.
I would say that I am now just not attached emotionally to results. And I think in the early days of my career, I would be too concerned with, busting out on a final table bubble or busting out in 7th. And getting unlucky and thinking, how can this happen? Like, when will it end? All of this. But actually recognizing that this is how tournaments work. And, you can play incredibly well and then lose ace, king versus queens on the final table bubble. And that's it, game over.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being less emotionally attached to those results is really, really important. That is going to happen. And sometimes you're going to be on the right side of it. And sometimes you're going to be on the wrong side of it. And whatever happens, you've got to be happy with it. Like, as long as you made the right decision, then all is okay.
That's good. So let's kind of circle back to what you're doing today. Remind folks kind of what your program is, where they can find you, how they can connect with you, and how you can maybe help them become a better player.
Sure. So definitely head to mttpokerschool.com. And we've got a mailing list on there, so you'll be kept up to date with. I do various free training videos on YouTube, so you'll get links to that, and free articles and information about the podcast that I do actually as well. So I do a very regular podcast called Poker on the Mind with Dr. Tricia Cardner, and we discuss mindset and tournament poker strategy and everything to do with tournament poker and mindset and everything like that. So yeah, if you want to, if you've enjoyed listening to my voice on this, then yeah, definitely check out the podcast. It's called Poker on the Mind. You can find it on iTunes and Stitcher and various other podcast apps as well.
Yeah, and I would let me jump in. I would highly recommend that for folks too. I know we've had Tricia on a little bit. She's given a little bit of audio, for some of our discussions about going on tilt and that sort of thing. And she has a great approach, and she's the one that actually referred me to you. And it's a great podcast, especially for those of you guys that are out there that do struggle with that emotional side of poker. I think it's a great podcast for that, at least the episodes that I've heard. And I'm sure it's much broader than that, but I do highly recommend that.
Yeah, I feel like the sort of emotional and mental side of tournament poker is really, really important, because tournaments are brutal by nature. Like as I discussed earlier, like getting in a big flip, then pile table bubble, like that's going to happen time and time again. And being sort of prepared for that is really important. So you can continue to fire, whether you're playing live and you go and register for the next tournament, or you're playing online and you just click the register button. To carry on going and playing really, really well, despite those things that perhaps don't go so well, is really, really important. So yeah, the sort of joining of the two made a lot of sense to me when we first started.
So Poker on the Mind podcast and the MTT Poker School,
Yeah.
.com.
That's it, mttpokerschool.com. And you can find out all about the coaching that I have available. So I do hourly coaching, but I prefer to take on students who really want to see the biggest improvement. So I do a monthly coaching package as well. And most of my students on there, they continue month after month. So we'll have a coaching call each week, and I set regular exercises and homework. Even coming from an education background, I do tend to set some homework, which might seem strange to adults, but yeah, it's important that you're putting the work in off the table. And I mean, I know this is not, we're kind of going off on a tangent here, but going kind of back to what we were saying, I think there's a lot of players that think that they can watch a training video or read a book and they're just going to win the main event. And as soon as you realize that there's a ton of work that needs to happen away from the game and away from lessons and away from watching the training video once and not making any notes, then you realize, okay, this is actually pretty tough, but I really want it, so that's what I'm going to do.
No, I think that's so true. And the way I understand this now, Gareth, if people sign up for your coaching, you will pay all of their expenses to be able to fly out to England every month to visit with you, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, you get on the private jet and you come and stay with me for a weekend, and we play online poker. Yeah, not quite. Although that's maybe something that I should look at in the future. I think the monthly price would be a little bit higher if that was the case. But it's a nice idea.
Just a little bit, but your coaching does work for remote audiences, so people in the U.S. can connect with you and do the calls and that sort of thing. No problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I have students all over the world. So Australia to Greece to Canada, America, and Europe as well. And yeah, everything's done through Skype. So I will record the lesson. So at the end of the lesson, you get a video to watch back. Because when I was learning, when I first got coaching, I would always ask if I could record the session, and most coaches were okay with it, but most of them were, some of them were a little bit funny about it. Perhaps they thought I was going to share it, but it was always just for my own development. And I always found that I would watch it back, and half of it I completely missed during the lesson.
Yeah.
So it's that's something that I offer. So yeah, you get an area of Google Drive where I just upload your videos and any notes and any resources. So that's just you can keep going back there, and you can study the video, and you can make your own notes, and you can have the dialogue after the session. So it's not just, okay, I'm here for an hour and then see you later. It's very much okay. Here's the video. You watch it back. You read through the notes. You you follow up those notes, and then I can give you some feedback on that. And it's kind of that constant dialogue. So whilst you might pay and have 4 hours of coaching a week, you get everything in between as well.
And everybody that I've talked to that's ever had professional coaching says it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Now, as a recreational player, I look at it and I go like, ooh, the cost, yikes, baby. I don't play enough to justify it. Everybody I've talked to that's actually done it, it's worth it. So check out Gareth's stuff. But even, if you've sort of checked out here, listening to the podcast, there's some things that Gareth is saying here that can be implemented even if you're not paying for a professional coach. Things like talking to people that are better than you, recording it, taking notes, rereading it, revisiting it, recording it. All of those things are things that we can do as recreational players to get better. Now, I think, we're going to make those big jumps by getting, really good help, really good professional help, from people like Gareth. But don't lose sight of the fact that a lot of this stuff you can do without actually paying a coach to do.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing is as well, I offer lots of free things as well. Like whilst I am, this is my business and it's my livelihood and I'm making money from coaching and from playing. I still do offer some free stuff. So, I think it's over 200 free training videos on YouTube. That's youtube.com/MTT Poker School. And then I run a Facebook group as well. So, it's an opportunity. Like I was talking about before, when I didn't have access to the forums and the Discord and Skype groups, now we have Facebook and Facebook groups. And it's an opportunity for any of the listeners to come into that group and start posting questions. You can ask questions about strategy or buy-ins or bankroll management, just anything to do with tournament poker.
Is that a public Facebook group or is that a paid subscription?
It's completely free. It is closed, so you do have to answer a couple of questions on the way in.
Is it MTT Poker School? Is that the name of the group?
Yeah, so it's facebook.com/groups/MTT Poker School Classroom.
Okay.
So yeah, it's the classroom keeper is the sort of that offshoot, I guess.
So a lot of great ways to connect with you, both free resources, some paid resources to go to that next level. Great stuff, man.
Cheers.
Do you have anything coming up in the near future that are for plans for expansion, or are you kind of rolling with what you got for now?
I am looking into throwing out or rolling out some courses. They seem to be very sort of hot right now.
Yeah.
I think that there's definitely an area where there's some players that come to me who are not quite ready for my coaching. Like, I'm happy to coach them at their current level, but actually a course might be better off. It might be better for them. Like, just to spend some time going through the course as almost like a prerequisite to then having one-on-one coaching.
Right. No, I like that idea a lot.
That's in the works at the moment.
Okay. Well, we will wrap up here, but any final words on either what you're doing or advice to the recreational players that are trying to go to the next level at all?
I mean, the best advice I can give you is just, play as much as you can, keep firing, and just recognize that if you really want to succeed, then you're going to have to put the hours in off the table. So you're going to have to work really, really hard. It's not easy to make a living in this industry, but it's a lot of fun when you do.
Gareth, thank you very much.
Cheers, Steve.
Well, thank you once again, Gareth, for being with us on the show. Fantastic interview. Also want to thank Running Aces Racetrack and Casino for all you've done for helping to boost and promote and support the Rec Poker podcast. I really enjoy playing there. Made a lot of great friendships there. A lot of great folks there, and I'd highly recommend, if you're in the Minnesota area, check out Running Aces. It's also a great way to on-ramp from, if you're playing home games, bar league games. There's some great $30, $60, $75 tournaments that aren't too tough on the break roll, that are a great on-ramp for you to get in there. The staff is great. They'll work with you. The players are great, especially some of the daytime tournaments where they're super friendly, and they'll help you kind of get acclimated. But we want to grow this game, and I think what you're learning on the Rec Poker podcast, you can now put to work in some of those tournaments and start to feel confident and eventually start to play those bigger tournaments. So I would invite you to do that. Personally, I'm super excited. We're getting close here to the end of May, which means I'm about 2 weeks away from heading out to Vegas for the World Series of Poker. I'm going to be firing the Millionaire Maker and also a bunch of the daily tournaments. So I'm really excited about that. I got a great group of 6 guys that are going to be out there spending some time. And so I'm excited to do that and excited to report back on the podcast how things went. Hopefully it will be good news. But thanks for everybody for helping to spread the word about this and for supporting us and for encouraging me along the way. That's it for this week. Chat with you next week.